Hi, welcome back to the Variance Analysis, the Global Accounting Network podcast aimed at helping finance professionals learn from the super successful industry experts and drive their career forward. My name's Adrian O'Connor. I'm the CEO and founding partner of Global Accounting Network. The FTSE 100 is an obvious destination for many a qualified accountant, but it's also an easy place to get lost or overlooked. Today, we're joined by Edward Jamieson. Edward is UK Finance Director for Just Eat. He started his career in the Big Five, as it was then, progressing through to corporate finance in Deloitte before moving into consulting. This set him up nicely for his journey to be FD of one of the most exciting entrants to the FTSE 100 in recent years. He'll discuss the route, the challenges, the skills needed to excel, and how you can gain them. So it's a great listen for anybody looking to rise to the top in big PRCs. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Edward Jamieson, who can give you a bit of a rundown on who he is and what he does.
Hey, hello everyone. So my name's Edward Jamieson. I'm the Finance Director for the UK business at Just Eat Takeaway PLC. So in terms of what I do in this role, I am a country finance director. So the UK is one of the most important countries for Just Eat. It's one of our largest parts of our business. So I'm here doing the full scope of a finance director role. So I work both on the commercial finance business partnering, working with the managing director for the UK and with teams across marketing, across logistics and across sales, then together with all of the accounting, the reporting, the controls and risk piece. And then as well, and an area that's very important for us at Just Eat is the accounts payable side, where we're paying our over 50,000 restaurant partners every week their earnings from the orders that come through onto our platform to them. So that's a little bit about my role now, and this has been an incredibly exciting 3 years for me so far. I've been here just over 3 years now, and this sector, online food delivery, has changed enormously over that time. This business has grown very, very rapidly, and this is really one of these consumer trends that has changed so much. So a hugely exciting sector to work in. But in fact, my background, perhaps some of you watching are either in the Big Four at the moment or considering joining the Big Four. And like many finance directors in the industry, that was where I started. Actually started at Arthur Andersen and started in audit. I did mid-markets work, and I found that actually a really useful way to learn audit, because you got to see all parts of a business. You could really start to understand the business and around, rather than when you audit really, really big companies, you only do a very small sliver of it. So I did mid-markets work for 3 years there. Obviously, over that time, Arthur Andersen joined Deloitte, so became part of Deloitte. And then I spent a year doing corporate finance work advisory after I qualified. And I think I would certainly encourage everyone to, once they complete an audit, to consider other practice lines within the Big Four. I think there's a lot of fantastic experience that you can gain working in, whether it's in transaction support, in corporate finance, in corporate recovery type work. There's in consulting, there's so much more to gain. So I spent an additional a year there, and then moved into strategy consulting. And for me, that was a really important decision, and one that I actually look back on has been extremely valuable for me. I think we learn a great and a really valuable set of skills as chartered accountants, but we operate in a particular way. And spending a couple of years in strategy consulting enabled me to develop a different tool set, how to think about business problems, how to approach them, and how to run a business. And so I spent just under 2 years at a firm called Marathon Associates, which is a small strategy consulting boutique that works with major FTSE 100 and Fortune 100 businesses, and is similar to some of the well-known businesses, the Bains and BCGs that you may have come across. So again, I worked on multiple sectors there, did a variety of cases, and then was able to use that as a springboard to go in-house. And I think a piece that was very important for me, and something that was considered early in my career, was what do you want to do? Do you want to advise, or do you want to lead and decide? I think there's plenty of advantages to each career, but for me, I was clear that what interested me was going down more the route of running a business, making decisions, leading, building a business, rather than advisory And so I joined Diageo, so obviously a well-known UK PLC, so working in the drink space. And that was great to go to Diageo. It's a very mature, large, well-structured organization that was able to provide me with a lot of experiences through my time there. So I started, having come from a couple of years in strategy consulting. That was the way I went in, and I joined the strategy team for Africa. So Africa was at the time was approximately 10% of Diageo's business. So Guinness is actually a very, very popular beer brand across Africa, with a growing spirits business as well. And so I had a really interesting couple of years there, doing a variety of strategy and business development projects, working across countries as diverse as Cameroon, Angola, South Africa, and really seeing the commercial reality of how we built those businesses and run those businesses on the ground. After doing that for a couple of years, I was keen to move back into a line finance role, because I knew for me that finance director route was one that I wanted to go down. And so I moved internally and actually relocated away from London, having been, although with extensive traveling at Diageo, I'd always been London based at that point. But I was geographically mobile, which is also, I think, a very important point for you all to consider. I moved to Amsterdam with Diageo, and I was there as the commercial finance manager for what was called a global supply chain business. Again, that gave me a completely different sort of vantage point and set of experiences than I'd had sort of in Africa. It gave me a global understanding of Diageo, and it taught me a great deal about supply as well. For those of you who work in sort of physical businesses and where supply chain is important, it's actually tremendously difficult to get the right products to the right place at the right time at the right cost, and so that was a real learning curve. And it was also the first time that I led and built a team. So I picked up a team of 6 individuals there, and obviously gained a lot and learned a lot through leading that team. And that culminated then in me taking my first finance director position. So I moved to be the finance director of Benelux for Diageo, still based in Amsterdam, but covering obviously the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. It was about a sort of a top 20 market for Diageo, so a great first FD position to have. I worked with a fantastic managing director and team there, and we did. I think we really played an important role in turning around the business there. This was during the sort of very much the credit crisis period, when business performance had been very challenging, and we were able to reset the business back into a growth trajectory. So at that point, having spent a number of years at Diageo and was working internationally at the time, I had a sort of a choice to make. And I think for many people, staying within a major sort of corporate like that and moving around the world is a really good option. For me, having been away for quite a long time and starting to lose connection with friends and family, I wanted to come back to the UK. And I also wanted, while I was sort of still young enough, to gain career experience in a different company, rather than, for me, it wasn't right to be a Diageo life, although it is a fantastic organisation. And what I was looking for was to come into a business that was, I think, very different from Diageo. So it would enable me to build off the skills that I'd learned at Diageo, the fantastic FD training that I'd had, but to come somewhere quite different, come to a business that was growing. And so I joined Amazon, and I came into a slightly unusual role at Amazon. Amazon had recently acquired a subsidiary called the Book Depository about 6 months beforehand, that had been built up by a couple of outstanding entrepreneurs. But my job was to really take it to the sort of the next level, organise the finance team in a way that was right for the business that it was and the business that it would become, and then build it from there. So again, that was, obviously Amazon's an iconic company, sort of now a very, very impressive company. And so that was an absolutely fascinating place to work in. It was a very sort of transformational role as well. We changed the business enormously over sort of 3 years and rebuilt that finance team completely. So learned a very great deal from it. Amazon, say, an absolutely remarkable business. And I think many of the lessons that I learned there about how to run a business are imprinted on me. The culture at Amazon is absolutely sort of remarkable. but for me, I've been clear that I would like to be sort of predominantly a sort of a UK based finance director. And so what I wanted to do was to come back to back into that sort of UK environment and still continue to gain a UK PLC experience. So I joined another a business that was smaller but also a leader in its field at Greco, which is a temporary power solutions as a FTSE 250 business, and joined there as a finance director for Africa, which was which is sort of the most important part of geographically part of that business, but is one that was a sort of, I guess, a smaller P&L than the retail P&L I had, but one with sort of very large and sort of complex operations. And I think that is also an important point to consider. It's not just making the obvious moves or always wanting to make to a sort of a bigger P&L. Look for the sort of the complexity, the change as well. This was my chance to experience working with a team that was located, thousands of miles away from me. I was based in London, spent a lot of time traveling. A great deal of my team were based out of Dubai, but others then based in Paris as well, and based across the African continent. And so that presented me with a new sort of leadership challenge. We were again integrating two different African businesses, a francophone and anglophone businesses. So reorganizing that, building one team, a one common culture, and then of course looking at how we drove the business forward together. So that sort of multi geography piece was a new one for me. Sort of having worked in Benelux, that was Belgium and the Netherlands, is sort of fairly close to sort of each other, and then working Amazon and Book Depository, the team were all in one place. So this was really helpful for me in learning about how to sort of operate sort of across borders, build those relationships remotely. And personally for me as well as a finance director, gaining experience in a contract-based business. I've come from Diageo and Amazon. They're very high transaction volume businesses. Obviously Diageo consumer goods and Amazon retail were both high flow businesses. This, I felt that an experience that I was missing was this piece around contracts, how to negotiate sort of contracts and execute those, and I really got great exposure to that at Greco, and I hugely appreciate what I learned there, and I do think it's stood me in good stead since then. But for me then, 3 years ago, and in a period for my personal life as well, where with a young family, I wanted to spend a little less time away from home. And I also really actually missed the sort of consumer-facing tech piece. I joined Justine, which I talked about a little bit earlier, and I have really enjoyed the journey that I've been on here. For me, I think some of the things that I enjoy the most about here is the sort of obviously the growth side, hugely exciting. The tech piece, sort of feeling like I'm on the right side of the sort of technological changes in the world and sort of consumer trends, and then the combination of being consumer facing, but also having the relationships with the major brands. We have the likes of McDonald's and KFC, Greg's on our platform, and with working with some major logistics players as well. So that's a sort of a little bit about the sort of the path I've taken to get to this point in my career.
Thank you for that. That's a really useful summary. I think you and I have known each other since early on in your journey with Amazon, and you've been very kind to work with the Global Accounting Network in each of your roles subsequent to that. With the Amazon role being a relatively recent acquired subsidiary, tell us about some of the challenges you had in terms of the integration and the cultural piece of that, because we work with quite a lot of clients that go through similar challenges.
Absolutely, I think when I came in, essentially it was looking at what was the finance team doing when I arrived, and what did it need to do. And in essence, really, it was a team that did the basics very well. So again, it was very much focused on processing the sort of the transactions and doing this sort of the correct accounting from that, and that's an absolutely important foundational piece. What it wasn't doing was the sort of the commercial finance sort of business partner piece, the decision support, really having that strong relationship across the business with both commercial and products and tech colleagues. And so for me, the key was I actually had to therefore recruit a team that would sort of focus on that. it was also, and I think this is an important point for anyone with a sort of finance team, located in a different location. So the book depository business had a sort of logistics warehouse was just outside Gloucester, and the commercial side of the business at the time was based in sort of Windsor. For me, it made sense to actually have the finance team, obviously, with located in the same office as the commercial team. And so I also needed to recruit a new team to manage that move from Gloucester to Windsor. So I think the pieces that it taught me were about, first, obviously, that involved some individuals therefore sort of leaving the business. I think that the criticality of treating everyone with sort of dignity and respect in these situations where there are transformations, it's not always possible to bring everyone with you. And I think it's really vital that you are honest and transparent with individuals, and that you sort of help them to understand when these impacts do occur, the rationale behind it. And then secondly, the importance of also I think maintaining sort of momentum in the business. You need to keep the sort of the ship afloat at the same time as as obviously in this case sort of recruiting a new team. So there is a lot to sort of lots to juggle, but I get the lessons are being honest and transparent with people about these sort of these organizational transformations, having a clear vision for what you need, and then obviously there is a period when you are going to be working extremely hard while you execute that. But what it does, certainly it showed me, and it will show you as well, is that you are capable of doing more than you may sometimes think. You may doubt yourself, but actually you are able to to take this through and to back yourself in doing that.
Yeah, was it Windsor or Slough? It was.
So it was Windsor when I joined, and we then moved within the first few months to Slough. So Adrian, you only ever came to Slough to the nicer office. You didn't see the basement office in Windsor.
I was thinking Windsor as a location might have been easier to sell to candidates than Slough was. That was always
indeed. Indeed. It's actually Slough is actually much easier to get to. You can drive in, you can park. So the links are faster. Windsor is obviously quite a glamorous location, but a bit of a challenging one in terms of day-to-day logistics.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, most of the finance people we speak to are very strategic and very well planned, etc., as you would be in part of your job. But lots of them tend to not be quite so well planned and strategic in their careers. Did you always have that plan as to where you wanted to start up and where you wanted to get to, and how each part would feed into that?
In some areas, yes, in others, no. So I think I was clear that I wanted to go down the sort of the finance director route, and I'd love one day to sort of end up in a CFO sort of position. But in terms, therefore, of how to get there, I think the point is there's no, and you of course see this with all the candidates, there's no sort of one approach, there's no magic formula. And I think the keys are to be sort of to focus on gaining useful and valuable experiences and skills, making sure those are sort of complementary to try and sort of build and round out your set of skills. So at Diageo, there was a sort of a career framework, again, on the benefits of working for a major corporate. This learning development had really been thought through, and that really helped me to understand the type of experiences that I wanted to gain. So I think it's important to focus on sort of breadth. And so what I was looking for was sort of breadth, gaining new experiences, and looking to understand different industries. And so in terms of going, say, from Diageo into Diageo in the first place, then Amazon, working in Greco, and hence Justine, of course, that does come down to sort of some of the individual circumstances. So for me, the focus was on skills and experiences and sort of personal and career growth.
So as you look at your current role, which would be hugely attractive to thousands of finance professionals around the country, what would you say are the major skills or competencies that are absolutely essential to succeed in what you do within Justine?
So I think for me, obviously, there's the critical importance of the sort of the finance basics. And you need to make absolutely sure that you're sort of, the foundations of your accounting and your reporting and your controls are right and robust and reliable. And that is your sort of foundational layer. And I think that's something that you can never ignore. Sort of, we have a great responsibility as finance directors to make sure all those basics are absolutely right. So I think that's key. But what you then need to do to sort of build, on top of that is, I think, the commercial finance business partnering piece is very important when you're looking for, a managing director. Very much wants a sort of finance director who's their sort of chief partner, and they want them to be able to sort of work with them and support them and operate almost as sort of a chief operating officer within that business. And so you need to have that curiosity, that interest, to really look and try and understand, how does the business actually work? Sort of, how and where do we make money? What are opportunities for growth? Where do our risks lie? And then you can think, how does that play back into the financial piece, rather than just focusing around the recording of the results.
And we find quite a lot of finance directors that have gone through the FP&A routes and gone, qualified, gone into an analyst route, and then followed that route all the way through, never really touching the controllership piece or the accounting piece. Do you think, in your experience, that puts people at a disadvantage based on what you've just said?
I mean, I think it all sort of very much depends. It's hard to give a sort of a hard and fast rule. So for me, certainly what was very valuable was my sort of audit training. So doing that sort of external audit piece does give you the sort of the foundations to be able to understand these sort of controls and risk dimensions. But I didn't ever do a sort of full sort of controls role before coming into sort of a finance director piece. Obviously, once in here, it's something I've absolutely made sure I have focused on. I would, I think, and coming through, as you said, perhaps from practice into FP&A, moving up through there into FD roles, an absolutely valid path to go. I think what it does mean, though, is when you either when you're sort of a business unit finance director, or perhaps on your route to being a CFO, spending time as a group controller, I do think it is important to make sure you do gain that sort of exposure and gain that confidence that you do understand the controls and assurance agenda, and can ensure that's as it needs to be.
You and I have been around doing this for a while, and I think the role of finance, or of a finance leader, has changed fairly significantly in that time, in my experience, and certainly in what people ask for. How would you summarize the role of a finance director and how that's changed over the last 10 or 15 years?
Sure. So, I mean, I think in terms of summarizing, well, one of the areas that we haven't touched upon yet, or talked much about, but is key. And it doesn't matter whether you're a finance director, a marketing director, a sales director, whatever it may be, but is the people leadership sort of piece. And so that's something that obviously has not changed in terms of its importance, but I think there are so many sort of tools and support sort of areas and sort of learning development available now for all of us, that I think fundamentally, to succeed, and you want to make sure you have your team needs to be succeeding, your team needs to be developing, learning and growing. And so I think that sort of in terms of finance, that people leadership piece is critical, and I think that is something that has always been important, but it should always be the sort of number one piece. I think to your point then about what has changed is that sort of piece and sort of commerciality and sort of that span across operations. I think sometimes you hear people talk about a bit of a sort of a license to sort of hunt and fish across the business, and that's one of the things that I think is tremendous about working in finance, is you do get that vantage point across the business. Now, I have never worked in a business where finance wasn't sort of front and center. I've always worked in businesses where it's been important, but I obviously have heard people talk about others in the past, but I think no longer now, where finance was a little bit more, as sort of seen as a support function. And that I think is what's changing. I think there'll be very few businesses now where finance wasn't, very much front and center, working, in the right way across the business to, deliver business results.
Yeah, we had that conversation fairly frequently with small businesses that are hiring their first FD or CFO, because quite often, if they've never seen what a good FD or CFO can do for them, it's very difficult for them to understand the value that person brings, and often the cost that's attached to that person. And I think that's a conversation we have fairly frequently with business owners as they're looking to make that transition.
Yeah, I think that makes sort of complete sense to me. And again, if I think a little bit about Book Depository as well, and some of the ways the entrepreneurs who built up did it, they were obviously tremendously shrewd business people, and they very much made the decisions themselves. So in effect, they did have that sort of model in place. So no, that makes absolute sense to me, Adrian.
How do you think automation is affecting finance or will affect finance over the coming years?
So I think that automation and sort of more broadly, obviously the whole way in which sort of accounting systems, data lakes, and so on, and that whole sort of ERP world is it actually, I think, can enable us to keep automating some of the more sort of repetitive, important but repetitive parts of the role, enable us to sort of speed up the ability to say close the books accurately, correctly, sort of on time, and actually then frees up our time to focus on what can we really do in partnership with other parts of the business to move the business forward. So I do see automation as actually a tremendous opportunity for finance professionals to look at how we can use it to make sure our business is on very robust footing, but enable us as a foundation for us to build off. And if I think in particular one other aspect of automation is data. And just working in a business like Justine, the sort of tech business there, the level of data that we have available to I think test hypotheses, to look for insights and solutions is just unimaginable compared to what would have been the case 10 or 20 years ago in many businesses.
And do you think there is a challenge, or there will be a challenge, if you remove a layer of the more repetitive tasks or the more admin-driven tasks? You're taking away a training ground that does actually feed through to the more senior roles in accounting and finance at the moment?
I think that automation, I think it's a fair point. There's always a balance to be struck there, but I think that automation doesn't negate the need for that sort of deep human review and grip on those numbers. It may automation can obviously flag journals that perhaps maybe sort of misposted, or things like that, but that absolutely doesn't remove the responsibility and accountability that we've got, and we will always need to have management accounting teams, whatever it may be, who are very, very focused on getting that right, and it just provides tools to help them identify faster where some of the inevitable issues do lie.
Makes sense. And we wouldn't be current if we didn't talk about flexible working, home office versus in the office. What do you see that, or the future of that, being for Just Eat Finance?
So, I mean, I think that Just Eat, obviously the organisation is doing a lot of work at the moment on looking at what the approach will be in the future, across the organisation, not sort of specifically within finance, and how this sort of and how to make this sort of hybrid model work. So I've no doubt we're going to come up with with a model that's actually great for our team, for our employees, that provides sort of flexibility, but also importantly gives us the opportunity to sort of work together and sort of collaborate. I've started to come back to the office now, sort of broadly, sort of 1 day a week at the moment. This is of course all in line with government guidelines, and will continue to change as those change. And I've really appreciate the opportunity after well over a year of working from home to be able to collaborate with colleagues here. I think there are many ways that we can work very effectively together remotely, but there's also ways in which we can solve problems and coach and mentor our teams much more effectively when done in person, obviously in an appropriately socially distanced way.
Yeah, I've really struggled with it at times. I think your experience of managing people across the world, in Africa, etc., must have come in handy, I guess, as you've been forced to be remote from everybody in the UK.
Yeah, yes. I mean that to that point, that's it's not the first time that I'm used to managing people remotely. I think what's changed is simply the tools that we have to do that, and look at the sort of the video facilities, the abilities to sort of to be working simultaneously within documents are for me just fundamentally different from anything I had a number of years ago, and so it actually has made it feasible. I think the other piece as well has been having a sort of stable and settled team. I've got a fantastic team here, sort of at Just Eat, and and I do think that part of it, of having that sort of having those established relationships in place, has also enabled a more effective way of working remotely. But back to your original question, then clearly we need to look at how we continue to adapt and evolve in the future.
Yeah, I know you and I had a bit of an offline chat about being in the office versus being at home with the noise of children behind you. So it was right on cue that my daughter there decided to start crying in the background. Hopefully that you couldn't hear that, but she decided now's the time for her to kick in with her post-nap crying.
Yeah, don't worry. I did hear it, so I was just waiting for the right moment to call it out. But of course, many of us do have young families at home. Well, personally, I enormously enjoy being able to spend more time with my children. Over the last year, it does of course come with its sort of its challenges that we've all had and that we've all encountered. So I think a bit of sort of good humour, tolerance on all sides is really sort of what's needed here. But we're all learning how to navigate our way through this.
We're incredibly lucky, I think, as parents of young children, to have had that additional time at home with them, as you say. And my daughter's got very good now. She sits outside the office door rather than just opening it and coming running in. So it's been good. Now, the other thing that we've done quite a lot of work around diversity and inclusion in finance. Is that something that you're actively involved in with Just Eat?
Yeah, and diversity and inclusion is incredibly important for us. So we actually run, more widely than finance, we run obviously a big initiative, a big sort of STEM initiative that is very much focused on how to support a more sort of diverse range of sort of candidates through into tech careers. That obviously includes finance, but is broader than that. And yes, this is we are a modern business that reflects our consumers are fully reflect the sort of the multicultural nature of the UK, and that's absolutely the business that we want to have sort of ourselves. So yeah, diversity and inclusion is something that is very important for us, and so it is for my team as well. I've got a real breadth in terms of sort of backgrounds and all sorts of differences within the team, and it's actually sort of I think something that's very powerful, enabling in the team to operate well. We all come at things from different perspectives and have a well-rounded well-rounded team as a result.
Perfect. I know we're short of time, so just in terms of wrapping up, if you were to be advising a young Edward Jamieson now on the career path that you were taking, is there any words of wisdom that you give somebody back in the big four, big five who wanted to get on your career path?
Yeah, I think it's obviously being willing to sort of take a chance. So it obviously can be quite daunting if you're leaving sort of practice. Within practice there is a sort of fairly well-groomed set of career paths. There's a lot of options sort of internally, but actually I think the big four, they are very open-minded sort of organizations, and people do actually also return there. So I do think that what is important is to then, if you think industry is something that may sort of interest you, is take a chance, come and work in sort of come and work in a sort of a business, perhaps on secondment, perhaps moving sort of full time in, because you will certainly have a route back into the big four if that's sort of right for you. And that means that doesn't just mean, in my case, obviously I joined Diageo, a major FTSE business, but actually there are fantastic opportunities in businesses of sort of all sizes, and I think what you can also gain going to a small sort of business sort of scaling quickly, you're absolutely turbocharged. Your sort of the experience that you gain, your own sort of confidence and your ability to lead as a finance professional in a variety of situations. Okay,
and then finally, as a shout out to Just Eat, what's the best thing about working in finance at Just Eat?
I think we're an integral part of the business. It's a fantastic company to work for. We operate right there really closely with our colleagues in sales and marketing, in operations and so on. So yeah, this is a fantastic growth business to work in, and finance is at the front and center of it. So we're of course always hiring. So come and have a look at us.
Come and talk to Global Accounting Network about it. All right, Edward, I really, really appreciate your time. I think there's some great insight there for people. And I look forward to meeting you for a beer as and when it's allowed and in due course.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that too, Adrian.
All right, cheers.
Goodbye.